Hello, my name is Niek Boevink. I'm a senior sales engineer working for Citrix in the Netherlands. In my daily job as a sales engineer, I have close contact with the customers, finding out their business needs and show how those can be tackled using our products. As my session title mentioned, I'm going to show how we can smoothen out the adoption process. For this, I work closely together with a customer of us, a Dutch adoption agency. They help waiting parents to adopt a child from the US. I had contact with them, the agency they work closely with in the US, and some of their customers, the waiting parents. They gave me insights how to improve the process of an adoption agency both on the customer and the employee side. I will show how our Citrix Workspace with Microapps and a task-driven workspace makes employee much more productive and increases security. But also how the process is much simpler and better for the customer. You'll see how we integrated Citrix Workspace with Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops, Microapps, Content Collaboration, Citrix Cloud and Zero Trust. But first, let me explain a little bit more about the adoption process. It all starts with the birth mother. The birth mother is a woman who considers the option to place her child into adoption. For this, she goes to an adoption agency. After having lots of meetings with the adoption agency, and when they are both absolutely sure that she wants to proceed, the birth mother gets multiple profile booklets where she can choose a family for her unborn child. When she made a choice, lots of documents need to be signed by her for the adoption agency. One thing that's good to know, the birth mother can change her mind during the process and even after the childbirth. The second people who are involved in this process are the people who want to adopt. They are called waiting parents or adoptive parents. Directly after starting the process to become on the waiting list, mail and document flow starts with the adoption agency. And lots of documents has to be signed, scanned and emailed to them. To give you an idea about this, it's about medical records, financial records, marriage registration, employee statements, etc. etc. And some of those documents also have to be legalized by the Dutch government. And those documents are only 1 year valid and then they have to be renewed. And normal-wise, a process of adopting a child takes somewhere between 1 and 5 years. And the other party that's involved is the Dutch and the US adoption agency. As mentioned, this process can take up multiple years. And you can imagine that during this period a lot of information is shared. The US and Dutch adoption agency have regular contact about the family who are on the waiting list. And after the birth mother has chosen a waiting family, the American agency gets in contact with the Dutch agency. They send background information and medical information to the Dutch agency and you share their thoughts. If this is a good match and if the waiting family matches this birth mother. If they both decide that this is a good match, then the Dutch agency calls waiting parents that they have been chosen. And after this phone call, the Dutch agency sends all background information, like medical information and family information, to the waiting parents. And then they have to decide, after reading all of this, if they accept a match. This information is mostly sent by email. All the people involved is shown here. And you can imagine that during this period lots of information is shared with all of them. And a couple of things to be aware of is that there's never a one-to-one from a birth mother to waiting parents. They have Skype meetings or email contact, but always the adoption agency is involved with that. And also when a birth mother has a meeting with a doctor or hospital, then the outcome of that meeting is sent to the adoption agency and they forward this to the waiting parents so that the waiting parents have always the latest information regarding the birth mother status and the unborn child. And you can imagine that all those information that is shared is all personal information, medical records, and you have the guidelines like HIPAA and GDPR that you have to keep in mind for that. To get an idea about the process for the adoption agency, I reached out to the director of the Dutch adoption agency. And I asked her if she can share some insights. She told me that they get a tremendous amount of email every day. And documents have to be saved at least for 100 years. A rule that's regulated by the Dutch government. And they now send medical information through email. They really don't want to do that, but they don't have an alternative. And for everything they have to log on to the virtual desktop. They struggle with security and guidelines, and their employee experience doesn't match their needs. And you can imagine that adoption agency is literally 24/7. Because a bird's delivery isn't planned between 9 and 5, with the result that the caseworker is using a lot of different devices to do their work. All in all, this is very time consuming and not very productive. I also had contact with the adoptive parents regarding this process. And they mentioned that it's hard to keep an overview of all the documents and versions. And some documents have to be refreshed after 1 year, and you don't want to miss those renewal dates. They have to repeat lots of steps over and over again. To give you an idea, every document has to be signed by them. And for this, they have to print a document, sign it, then scan it, and then email it back to the agency. And often it happens that the maximum email size is reached because all of those attachments. And then they have to find their own way to get the documents to the agency. Very time consuming and quite stressful. And waiting parents also mentioned that they didn't like the idea that documents with very personal information was sent through email. I want to introduce a solution that can smoothen out the entire process. With Citrix Workspace, they get multiple tools to become more productive. It gives a unified user experience across every device. And with Content Collaboration, they can reduce the email flow significantly. And from the Workspace app, they get direct access to the files on every endpoint, so they don't have to log on to the virtual desktop environment every time. It's really easy to save documents in the cloud, and keep in mind that they have to save them for 100 years. So it's really beneficial if you don't have to worry anymore about underlying infrastructure. And all in all, it increases security and productivity, and it simplifies IT and infrastructure. The Citrix Workspace offers for the employees a single unified customer-like experience, where you can work with all devices that you want. It doesn't matter if it's a desktop, a laptop, or a mobile device, even if it's company owned or employee owned. It doesn't matter. And it has the option to single sign on to all your applications and data. Makes it really easy. And you can quickly and easily use universal search to find the documents that you need. You don't need a VPN anymore to connect to your environment. Everything is available directly from the workspace, and it's secure by design. So you can organize everything. So everything a user has to have for their daily work. All the applications, all the files and content, and their desktops. And the great thing about this is that even without compromising the end user experience, you get a secure environment. You can imagine that in a bring your own scenario, you're not always aware that a keylogger is active or a screen scraper. And our workspace is secure by design, and it tackles that problem already. And it's always good to have a demo to get some insights about, okay, What are you telling and how does it look like? Let us get into that. First, let me give you some insights about the workspace for intelligence for a caseworker. It's a single pane of glass for all applications and data with a personal feed with tasks. And a caseworker has the option to look into an expense a birth mother has submitted, and with one single click, the caseworker can approve this expense. Very, very easy. Let me show it to you. They see, okay, a new expense is received. They can look into it and they can approve it. One thing to know is that after a birth mother had chosen a waiting family and the waiting family accepts and wants to move further with the adoption, from that moment everything is done for the child to get everything in place to have the best available care for him or her. That means that also all living expenses from the birth mother are paid from that point through the waiting parents. So you can imagine that a caseworker gets lots of expenses by all the birth mothers that they work with, and they have to look into that and to have to approve it before it's paid to the birth mother. Also, what you see and what I mentioned is that after every visit to a hospital or a doctor, the caseworker gets the information sent to them. They can look into it and send it and forward it to the waiting family. And with this, the waiting family is always up to speed with the latest status about the birth mother and the unborn child. And regarding the documents that have to be renewed, it's not only a problem for the waiting parents if the documents aren't legalized anymore. So it's also good for the adoption agency to really send a simple reminder to the waiting parents. So waiting parents, please keep in mind the documents are 10 months old. You have to renew them within 2 months. Really that easy. And also Skype meetings, etc., are shown in the personal task and activity list for the caseworker. I mentioned that the caseworker uses lots of devices. One of them is a mobile phone. The look and feel for a mobile phone is exactly the same as using it from any other device. So what she now gets with the workspace is that she can look into expenses from her mobile phone and approve it with one single swipe. Even when she walks from one meeting to another meeting, she is able to look into patient data and send it to the waiting family. Really that easy. One of the things that I mentioned is that it's really causing a problem for the caseworker that they sometimes want to let people to read a document, but they don't want to send it by email to them. This is always the problem when the birth mother choosing a waiting family and then the caseworker sends the information to the waiting family and they have to look into that document and see if they go ahead with the match or not. And the information that they get is really sensitive information with lots of background information, but also medical information. A caseworker doesn't like the idea that they send that information to a waiting family. You can imagine that if the waiting family says, okay, I don't want to move further with this match, then still all those private information is stored in their mailbox. For this, we have a view-only feature in Content Collaboration. It's really easy. You drag the document that you want to share in the workspace. You upload the document. Then you choose the option to share it and email it with Citrix. You fill in the email address of the waiting family and then you get the option to choose what you want to show them. In this, we show them that it's view only with a watermark, and it's during a specific amount of days visible. Waiting family doesn't have the option to download the file, print it, or do anything else with it. They are able to look into the document during the period that the document is available on any device, but they can't do anything else with it. So you choose 1 week in this fact, say okay, with watermark, done, and you send that to the waiting family. The waiting family gets an email. They open that email. The first time when they open it, they are asked to create an account. They create that account. And then they see the document that the caseworker has shared with a watermark, and they aren't able to download, print, or do other things with this document. So even when they decide not to move further with the match, then this document isn't in their email box stored or anywhere else. Another thing that I brought up was that it's a time-consuming procedure to download every time a file and then sign it and print it and scan it and send it back to the adoption agency. For this, we can really smoothen out this process of using eSigning. The document that you want to have signed, you can drag into the workspace. You can say share, choose the option send for signature, fill in the email address, then mark where you want to have the signatures in place, and then really with one single click you can send the document to the waiting family and ask them if they want to sign it. They get an email, the waiting family, they open it, and they come directly digital in the document and they can sign over here. Really much more easy than printing it, signing it, scanning it, and sending it back by email. If they have signed it, then the caseworker sees that the status has changed, can view into that document and see that the signature has placed and it's really ready. You can imagine that this all makes the work for a caseworker and an adoptive family much easier. For the caseworker, this makes work more productive and the employee experience improves. For the adoptive family, it's way less time consuming and stressful. Thank you for attending my session.